Hey, everybody. Long time no see. On sabbatical, sort of. Let's see here. Mr. Anderson, hello. Synth Fun, Wookie, Will. Hey, Reg. Zyrix, greetings. All right, so we'll let that drone in the background. So thanks for coming. Today, I actually wanted to make a tiny bit of music. But what I really wanted to talk about was a document I wrote that I want to share with you guys, just to see if it will be useful. It's I had a thing I just wanted to write. I was in the mood. Hang on a second. Let me flip over to this. There we go. And while I rarely put the chat up, I'm going to leave the chat up here. So we'll let the drone in the background, and I will make noodly noises. Occasionally. But what I wanted to do was talk about a manifesto. And if this is not of interest to you, that's okay. You can run away. What I wanted to do was talk about this thing here, the Manifesto for Critical Thinking in Synth Culture. And I wanted to get your thoughts, so I'm leaving the chat up. And I know you guys can see the chat, but I wanted to capture the things you say, right? I want to capture your feedback and things like that. This is not a incredibly important thing. This is something I wrote in about an hour, shared it with some friends, said, does this make sense? And the point of this is to, as it says here in this preamble, the world is full of synthesizers, hardware, software, modular, vintage, modern, etc. And it's rich and it's inspiring and it's full of possibilities, but it's also full of some things that aren't, they're not bad, but they're things that distract people from the happiness and joy of synthesizers. There's repeated opinions and there's brand loyalties and contentious claims and assumptions that are just sort of unexamined. And I'm not telling you what to do. I wrote this document. A manifesto is a statement of it's just a public statement. My wife was worried. She's like, why are you writing a manifesto? She's thinking of political manifestos, things like that, ideological, there's some darker connotations politically speaking. She's like, historically, manifestos are bad. I'm like, no. It's a manifesto because it's just a public statement. And so this manifesto exists to encourage thoughtful exploration, which most of us do, and independent decision-making, which most of us do, and deeper joy in music making, which most of us do, right? And it's just a statement to write down and clarify in my mind how I want to do that. And if this is useful for you, great, but I wanted to talk about it. Hey, Balther, first time. Hey, you like all the Nord stuff. That's cool, man. You got an A1 because of me. That's very cool. It's very flattering. Thank you. Hope you enjoy it. Anyway, so the purpose of this manifesto is not to tell other people what to buy or how to work. It's to promote just sort of ways of thinking that allow everybody to discover what serves their creativity, regardless of what you do. All right. So I want to walk through, there's 10 sections. I want to walk through them. If you get bored, beat it. Don't feel obligated to stay here. Put comments. If you read something that you disagree with, put it in the comments. All right. I want to hear it. And this is because this can be revised. It's going to be changed potentially. Right. But these are what I was thinking. See if they resonate with you. Goat felon. Greatest of all time felon or literally goat, like so. There is a long tradition of aesthetic related manifestos. Yes, Will, I agree. So here we are. So let's just look at number one. And what'll happen is maybe about halfway through, I'll make some more noise. And then at the very end, I'll make some more noise. So, but I'm curious what you guys think. So first, seek understanding of your own musical intent, right? Before choosing tools, that be synthesizers or software or whatever, hardware, whatever, consider what you want to express and explore, right? You don't have to do this, but this is a useful place to be, right? Think about what are you trying to do, or what are you trying to make or express, or, is it literally, I'm just having fun, right? If Wabbit shows up, he will definitely, reiterate that. He will say, I am here to mess around. Additionally, reflect on what aspects of music making energize you. Some people like sound design. Some people like performance. They like jamming. Some people like composing. Some people like experimentation. And a lot of people are like, it's all about the tactile thing for me. I get home from work and I just want to lay my hands on a machine and it's not a screen, and I want to feel the music. I turn my headphones on, or I've got a big sub and I turn it up and I want to feel it in my chest, right? It's an obscure to Canadian sitcom. I will have to check out Corner Gas. If it's out there on YouTube, I'll take a look for it. Thanks, Goat Felon. And then basically let your intention, let what you intend to do, not necessarily the trends of your peerage, or fear of missing out or peer pressure, guide your decisions around synthesizers, basically. A lot of people have observed that things come in waves and new products released and everybody's all nuts about it, and that's the trend of the week, right? And for some people, there's this fear of missing out. It's like, I have to try that before it's unavailable. They're going to sell out, or there's a limited run, right? And we'll talk about marketing and stuff, or our peer pressure, right? My friends, and I'm totally guilty of this, right? I like to, it's sort of a shtick, right? I like to tease people and be like, go buy more synths, right? And don't let, your peers necessarily, the pressure there, guide your intentions. So think about what you want to try and express or explore, right? And then figure out what parts of synthesizers, being a synthesizer enthusiast, is most important to you. And it could be more than one thing. You don't have to pick one and say, this is it. That's the only direction I'm going in. And then you decide where you want to go with that, right? Wookie says, if you're doing something and it's not fun, then you need to reevaluate your life choices. Right? Fair enough. So that's section one, right? This won't take too long. People are like, too long, didn't read, but it's not that bad. So 2, right? Manifesto part 2 is distinguish fact from preference, right? This is one that's close to my heart. Tech specs, the manual, measurable characteristics, and the architecture of a synthesizer. These things are facts, right? And descriptions like warm and sterile and fat and lifeless or cold, right? Those are subjective impressions, not facts. But that's okay. Subjectiveness, right? Subjective impressions, subjective experience needs to be respected as well. So if you feel that something is warm, analog filters are warm, that's, people should respect that, right? They shouldn't say, well, that's a subjective experience, therefore it's invalid. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is subjective impressions are different from facts. And you just need to distinguish between facts and preferences so you can understand, because they mean different things. And then we should be celebrating diverse interpretations, right? If I think something, let's see, the Hydrasynth came out, and I was like, this thing's pretty thin sounding. The modal, cobalt, and argon synths, boy, those sound really thin to me. But other people would argue, no, those sound sharp to them, not thin. It sounds digital, but it's definitely powerful, right? So, I had a different interpretation. And that's okay. We just are distinguishing between facts and preferences. We're not carrying one over the other. Hey, Milo. All right. So Moving on to 3 here. This is another one. Question repeated claims. Like, this is core on the internet. Everything gets repeated over and over and over again. And they're claims, right? And that's like, it's actually itself a weird sort of smell. When something is getting repeated over and over again, and you look at it and you can't distinguish between whether it's a fact or an impression, or maybe you can, and it tends to be an impression. Impressions get repeated a lot over and over again. So common statements like analog versus digital supremacy, hardware versus software debates, like these are the religious wars, right? Pro gear, right? It's not the gear, it's the ear, that kind of thing. They circulate everywhere, and it's sort of, we swim in them every day. They're in the pool that we're swimming in, and we're just covered in this stuff all the time. And that's fine. You can, you're going to experience it. You're going to say it. I have said these things. But when you hear people say these things, it's okay to scrutinize them, right? Question those repeated claims and ask some basic questions. Say, what evidence supports that? So analog versus digital, which one's better? I think one's better than the other, right? Well, what evidence supports that, right? And people can get really defensive when you ask questions, right? What evidence do you have? And they will be like, maybe they have evidence, maybe they don't. People who don't have evidence very often can be quite defensive. And you're not attacking them, give them a pat on the back and just say, hey, show me. If you show me the thing that supports this statement that you're making repeatedly, I'll agree with you, right? There's a thing we do at work. It's sort of a gentleman's agreement, gentle person's agreement that says we're arguing about some concept. Well, if you prove to me with science why I'm wrong, I'll flip over and agree and be on your team, right? And so that's why we want to question repeated claims, right? So you ask for evidence, and then when you're given evidence, you have to say, well, what assumptions underlie that evidence, right? They could say, oh, well, I'm quoting this article that I read on this blog. And it's like, okay, well, anybody can write a blog, right? Anybody can write a manifesto, right? So what assumptions does it have? People say, digital to analog converters, color, sound, right? Well, what evidence supports that? Well, we've got this paper. Okay, well, what assumptions are under the paper? Who wrote that paper? Oh, it was written by industry. Well, who in the industry? Oh, this company, and the scientists who worked for this company wrote it. And okay, and does that company sell digital to analog converters? Maybe, right? So follow the money. Reg, thanks, Reg. Reg is Tinker Scientist is saying, quoting me from our Discord last night, and I was like, I effing hate Windows. It's because I was forced to use Windows to update a piece of gear last night that only the programming tool for a piece of gear of mine only is available on Windows. And I have one tiny little HP Windows laptop. It's like a netbook that's in the back of the closet. I pull it out when I need to do something like that. And of course, Windows said, hey, you haven't turned me on in a year. Get ready for 3 days worth of updates that need to run first. But yeah, there is a repeated claim from me. Thanks, Reg. So anyway, so look for the evidence and then look at what assumptions are under it. And then here's the thing. When people show you evidence that proves something, you can also ask, is that universally true? Or is it conditionally true? Or is it just personally true? And all of those things can be, appropriate in the context of what you're talking about. So Will says, the way of a conventional wisdom hardens around a piece of gear is fascinating to watch, but it's probably not useful for an individual person making a decision about that gear. Right. You decide. Well, that's sort of the gist of this manifesto. We'll get there. Hey, Harmonic. You only have one piece of gear that requires Windows. Nice. So an example of something that, it's different if it's universally or conditionally true. You can say, and I don't have any notes here prepared with examples, so I'm pulling these off the top of my head. What do you guys think? You could come up with some as well. You know, if you've got evidence that says, okay, here's one that is contentious. This is something I've said a lot. Here's a repeated claim. I say Moog polysynths tend to have trouble staying in tune. Okay. I say that a lot. And some people are like, agree with me, and some people get angry with me, right? Well, so what evidence supports that? Well, I've owned a Moog polysynth, and I've used many Moog polysynths. You know, most recently, I've owned a Moog 1, and I owned it for 18 months, and I was desperately waiting for their firmware to fix the tuning issues. And I have a friend, one town over, good old Bob. Bob also has a Moog 1, and his only has a very minor tuning issue, right? So there's something different between his, go to his studio, and his Moog 1 was mostly in tune, not terrible, while mine had 2 soundboards out of the 16 were definitely funky, and not in a good way, right? So there's evidence, right? But my statement, Moog polysynths tend to get out of tune, is that universally true, conditionally true, or personally true? Well, for me, it's personally true. And it might be conditionally true based on there's a bunch of people on the internet who agree with me, who claim to have evidence, their own personal experience that supports that. But it isn't universally true, because obviously my friend Bob, his is okay, right? So you have to sort of understand repeated claims and sort of take them in stride. And you can get bent about it, right? But the sort of thrust of this manifesto is, if we all have relatively civil discussions about it, we don't need to throw each other under the bus, or have, you know, go away getting butt hurt, right? Let's see. Goatfelon says, I've been on Linux for a couple months now, and my only regret so far is I didn't change sooner. All right. Wookie's like, here we go, Windows bashing. All right. So yeah, there's some more repeated claims. And then lastly, in this section 3, right, how would someone with different goals or tastes interpret it differently, right? So what if someone isn't really as OCD as I am about tuning? And I've said this repeatedly as well. I'm totally obsessive about tuning. I don't like synths that drift more than 10 cents out of tune. It bugs the crap out of me. And I own synths that do that, and I just deal with them in time and for various reasons, right? But someone whose goal or their tastes are different than mine, they're not so OCD about tuning, they don't care, right? And so they'll interpret my claim, my repeated claim of Moog synths go out of tune, Moog polysynths go out of tune. They're going to interpret that as like an attack, potentially, or they're going to at least be like, this guy's bonkers. I got no issues with it. And it may be because they don't care about tuning, right? They're a texture, a noise artist, right? They're making, industrial, or they're making, avant-garde stuff. They're doing microtuning, microtonal stuff, right? So, you take it in stride and you look at it within the appropriate context. GearTube is a shambles now. That is also a repeated claim. Anyway, so let's keep rolling. That's section 3. Okay, so let's look at section 4 here. So once you've done the first 3, oh, hey, Doug. Doug says, I've seen so many cases where people don't think about developing their skills and just think that a software product will make their music better. That is true. That happens quite often. We'll get to, there are actually some things in the manifesto about that. Scale assist, chord assist products, or AI assisted composing. I actually heard an AI written song that I liked, and I liked it so much I saved it. I saved it to my hard drive. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. So section 4, understand your motivations behind acquiring gear. Okay. This is not about, gas. This isn't a very roundabout way of talking about gas. It's that there's lots of reasons why you acquire gear. And all you really need to do is understand your motivations, right? Identify whether the interest for a piece of gear arises out of curiosity. Like, that's a weird thing. What is that, right? The Soma, what's that Soma thing, the Soma synth that looks like a slice out of a tree, right? That's just so weird looking. I'm very curious about that. or aesthetic appreciation, right? I like the look of something. An example would be the Udo Super Gemini. I find that a very aesthetically pleasing synth. I think it's very fascinating that it has two duplicated sets of controls for one for each layer. I like that aesthetically, right? Or what your workflow needs are, or for historical reasons, right? There's a bunch of synth people out there who are all about historical porpoises, right? They love looking at the entire nostalgia, the entire retro market. What is it? Vulture culture, right? That man is all about the classics, right? The vintage stuff, right? It's not his only goal, but he's definitely a lightning rod for that sort of stuff. And then there's just community influence, right? There are people in the community who are trying to be and successful at being influencers, right? So, and they may be influencing you to try and get you to acquire gear because that's their job, right? And I'm not talking about shilling, right? Shills are people who are trying to deceive you. I'm just talking about people trying to influence you. Like it's marketing, right? So try and be honest about the role of marketing and nostalgia and price perception and status, right? Expensive synths. I can't afford an expensive synth, but that guy can afford the expensive synth. Is it a status symbol? Am I perceiving it as such? Is he trying to make me perceive it as such, right? We're aware of all these things. If I go to the local synth meetup and somebody pulls out a $50,000 Buchla rig, I'm impressed, right? And that's like, I'm going to assume that person is probably driving a Bentley or something, right? Maybe not parked in the neighborhood, but synths are definitely can be status pieces, right? And then once you're looking at that, try and recognize the type of joy that the item brings, because that's what it's about, right? We are synth enthusiasts because they make us happy, right? Be it however we use them or just collecting them or whatever. So understand that being a collector is just as valid as being a musician. Someone who goes and performs in a band, or being a composer, someone who sits in a studio and makes something, or being, someone who is an influencer. They're like, I want to have these synths to make my income by getting people to like them, right? So just recognize what type of joy a given item is going to bring for you, given your role with that. There's a relationship you have with the synth. And then let your purchases be intentional rather than reactive. Some of us, I would say most of us, are probably intentional when we buy stuff, right? But sometimes it's pretty reactive. I have bought a couple synths where the FOMO thing happened. It's like, there's a Kickstarter for this synth and they're only doing 500 and there's only 20, slots left in the early bird purchase session. And I'm like, oh, I need one of those. I need one of those now. And we go get them, right? That's a reactive purchase as opposed to an intentional purchase. So leave the hysterical porpoises alone. I will. But Reg says that joy is the root of it for him. I think it is for a lot of us, Reg. But we can forget that or we get distracted. And so hence in a moment of clarity, we were writing out this manifesto. So Goatfelon says, I'm so exhausted with marketing forcing its way into every aspect of modern life. I think the only way you can avoid that at this point, Goatfelon. I'm sorry, your handle makes me smile. Goatfelon. The only way to really avoid that is probably to get off the internet, or have some sort of thing you do where you're not on the internet. Because and TV is basically internet. It all comes to me through the same wires, right? Which may not be feasible, right? So much of our needs come to us, like our requirements, right? Communicative, maybe your work, things like that. It's going to come to you through the net. You're always exposed to it. But we do have to find a way. That'd be something worth exploring. David Knight says, me personally, oh God, guys, you can let go of the Windows stuff. Good gravy. Anyway, so let those purchases be intentional rather than reactive. All right. We go look at the next section, section 5, right? Evaluate instruments through frameworks, not hype. A couple of years ago, I put a video out where I tried to share the framework I use for evaluating synths. The video has not aged well, but it's out there. But you can build your own, right? A framework is just a set of questions or a set of criteria that you use to evaluate a piece of gear, right? And it typically isn't based on the hype and the marketing and the FOMO of the gear itself. It's on the facts, right? Not those subjective experiences. It's based on the facts of the specs of the synth, the measurable criteria of a synth, right? So you ask questions. You say, what can this synthesizer do that aligns with my musical aims? Right? Don't rely solely on reviews or popular sentiment, right? You want to use these structured questions or something like these questions. Again, I'm not advocating, I'm not giving you a what to do list, right? This is just to think about these ideas. What can this synth do that aligns with my musical aims, right? If you're a noise artist, right, what you need in a synth is very different than if you're doing, electronic classical composition for film, right? Or maybe, depending on the kind of film, maybe they do overlap. So Harmonic Sonic says, I've had a few reactive purchases, lesson learned. Well, what was one of them, Harmonix? Tell us in the chat. I'm curious. David Knight says, will you provide this as a PDF somewhere? I'm finding it very informative. Yeah, this is actually published online already. If you go to 1voltperoctave.com, that's where I'm reading this off of. It's there already. So 1 volt per octave, so all spelled out, all one word, all lowercase. All right. So section 5, evaluate instruments with framework, right? So what can this synth do that aligns with my musical aims? That's the first thing you ask yourself. And then you say, how intuitive or inspiring is its workflow for me, right? Because we talk about workflow all the time. And people are always questing for workflows. I'm a sucker for workflow videos. So someone's like, I'm going to describe my workflow for synthesizer music. I'm going to watch that video because I want to know and compare it to my workflow. Maybe there's a better workflow, right? We're always comparing and contrasting and trying to move things around. But you need to use whatever workflow currently you're using, or workflows. You can have more than one when you're evaluating a synth. That's part of the evaluation framework, right? And then are its features complementary to what I already own? So that doesn't mean you can't have duplicate features, right? There's nothing wrong with that. You can, some people collect SH101s. How many TB303 clones do you have? I got a friend named Sasha who's got like 12, and he built half of them from kits, right? There's nothing wrong with having overlap in the synth's behavior and features in your thing, but just be aware of it when you go to buy the next one and say like, okay, I've got 12. Do I need number 13? Right? And from Sasha's perspective, it's like, yes, I do. Right? And that's fine. There's joy there. That's the joy of collecting for sure, right? Harmonix says one of the things that he bought reactively was one of the audio thingies, Micro Monster 2. I know someone else who did that too. He picked up a Micro Monster 2, right? And then when he got it, he was a little underwhelmed, and he lived with it for a year or so. I think he lived with it for a year. I think he actually still has it, but he's looking to sell it, right? It doesn't jive with his workflow. Quick buys, not bad synths themselves, right? Oh, the double drummer. I'm not familiar with that one. But stuff you don't end up using. Yeah, I bought a, what was it? The drone box. What is it? A few $100. And it wasn't Donner. Maybe it was from Donner. There was like a drone synth. They had the small form factor, runs on batteries. It sounds great. And I totally bought it, in a reactive sort of place. It was on sale, and I joke and say that I bought it in my sleep accidentally. Like I accidentally clicked buy and then accidentally filled out all the form fields. Yeah, I hear that. So as far as the framework is concerned, right? You continue on, you could say, are these features some things I already have? Is it complementary? What is the creative value relative to its cost, right? Some things are cheap, like the little drone synth I bought. So its creative value was pretty high relative to its cost, right? But that $50,000 Buchla, right? That's much higher cost. And does it have more creative value than something different than, say, VCV rack, right? I don't know, right? And that may be important for you, but maybe not, right? And so you need to just consider it. You can consider it. Again, I'm not telling you what to do. And then lastly, what limitations might foster creativity rather than hinder it, right? So there's a repeated claim on the internet we're going to run across over and over again, right? They say limitations help you be more creative, right? Because if you have no limitations, you have too many options and you get analysis paralysis, and then you can't think about what you want to do. That is true, but there are limitations that foster creativity, right? And then there are limitations that hinder it. You can go too far. I've tried to do projects where I'm like, I'm going to use one synth for a project. Was it Aphex Twin who did an entire album using one synth? It's called like the Cheetah or something like that. And it's the world's like most difficult to use synth. And he used it to, that was the only synth he used on the video. I could be misremembering this facts, right? But I have made that mistake. I've said, I'm going to use one synth to make like an album. And that project died a horrible death of flames and fire because it was too limiting, right? So consider that. Hey, Soup. Welcome aboard, man. Good to see you. So consider those limitations, and then you say, are they fostering creativity or are they hindering it? Right? Doug says, or even say, bringing lots of gear to a show for the ego pump. That's something that happens too, right? You want to go, you're going to do perform. Maybe you're going to an open mic, and then there's that risk reward. It's like, do I bring all the vintage analogs out and risk them being damaged? But I want to bring them out because it's going to be cool. Pure prestige is definitely a thing. That's a good question. Yeah, the Cheetah MS800. There you go. Who makes that? Was Cheetah the company? I don't know. So anyway, evaluate your instruments using a framework, right? Don't just evaluate it through the hype. Hype says it's good, therefore it must be good, so I'll go buy it. I mean, that happens, but you may have more happiness and more joy if you don't. All right. So here's a quick vote. Let's see, we're 30 minutes in. I'm halfway through this thing. Should I keep going and then do some music at the end, or do we need a music break? I will do a little droning or some Berlin looping. Hey, Richard. You have a shed load of gear. Most of the time you only use a very small subset. And I get a lot more creative with less decision. Yeah, I agree, Richard. For me, that's very similar as well. I have a collection, right? But I have a flat horizontal surface in my studio. Most recently, my workflow has changed. So now I have a table that I keep empty. And I go to the collection and I pull synths out of the collection and I put them on the table. And I say, this is what I'm going to use to make music today, right? And that seems to work better for me. Okay. Doug, we got more votes to keep it rolling. So I'm going to keep rolling, okay? And we'll do some music at the end, I promise. So the people who are interested in this will get covered. All right, let's keep going then. So that was 5. Let's go through 6. There are 10 sections. Okay, so we're halfway through. All right, section 6 of our manifesto for synthesizer enthusiasts in the community. So test your ideas through experience whenever possible. And this is hard. I know this is hard, right? I live in Boston. There are synthesizer stores here. There are, music stores that I can go to try things. Granted, the most ubiquitous one is Guitar Center, and most Guitar Center synth sections are very sad. The Guitar Center nearest to me has a synthesizer section that I'm pretty sure is actually the dumping ground for all of the flagship workstation synths and arranger synths and digital pianos that all of the other stores wanted to get rid of because they were taking up space. So there's a big room with a ton of synthesizers in it at the Guitar Center that's close to me, but they are all these sort of like old, like janky flagships that have like been beat on. They're the floor models and things like that. But try to get to instruments in person, right? Borrow from friends, use demos, join your local meetups, or form a local meetup. If you're in Pig's Knuckle, Arkansas, and there's no music stores anywhere near you, right? Then you're like, there are no. I have to like fly. I have to get on a plane and fly in order to find some place where they sell synthesizers that I can try. That's tough, I know, but you got to sort of try and build a community at that point as an option, right? Do a meetup, and even if it's just 3 people, it'll grow, right? Maybe 10 years ago, there was a synthesizer meetup here in Boston that consisted of like 6 guys, and we were meeting at this fellow's house, this guy Paul Geffen, And it ended up growing, and I think there's like 350 members now, right? It just takes time, but that's an option. But try instruments in person. A YouTube video is not the same as trying it out for yourself. You know, I'm not going to say anything about that whole, you know, order it and return it. I don't advocate that, but, you know, copy parties are a thing. Compare sounds without knowing the brand or the price if possible, right? So if you can set up a thing for your synth buddies and say, hey, I've compiled a bunch of recordings of synths taken from various YouTube videos, and I've pulled out the sound stuff, and I've got the list of what's what, but we're going to do a listening party where we listen to all of them and say, which ones do we like? And then we'll reveal at the end what synths those were, right? Because your brain messes with you. And your sets expectations. We'll talk about biases next, but that's something you can do. You can compare without knowing the brand or without knowing the price. And it's like, what's that? That's $199 synth? Well, that sounds awesome, right? I'm looking at you, Behringer K2. So explore these instruments deeply enough to understand their strengths and quirks, right? You need to get, like if you go to a KnobCon or a convention, let's say you travel to one of the annual synth conventions wherever there are near you, there's a lot of pressure to get there and get your hands on the synth, but there's also a lot of pressure to get out of the way so the next person can try it, you know, and see if you can get in there when it's quiet, right? And take your headphones, and, you know, the reps will be fine with you cranking on that thing for 15 minutes as long as there's not a line of people behind you. See if you can really get your hands on that thing. And value firsthand experience over third-party certainty, because third-party certainty is really one of those subjective things, right? They're not facts. So Doug says, what's difficult is when you live in a rural area. Yeah, I understand. Yep, I understand, man. Live streams are clashing tonight. Hey, how's it going there? It's okay. I didn't intend for them to clash, but sorry. Harmonic Sonic says, I love playing at my music store when they do synth meetups. Yeah, that's the local synth meetup here happens at one of the local synth stores. Very kindly, they give it a good amount of space too. So all right, so that's section 6, right? Test ideas through experience whenever possible. Section 7, right, is recognize and mitigate cognitive biases. This is tough. This is really tough. And this is true of like the entire internet, not just SynthTube, right? Our minds play tricks on us, and we have these things that are pitfalls, confirmation bias, where we like information that validates what we already kind of believed or what we were hoping, right? Another form of confirmation bias is if you buy something, this is also sunk cost fallacy, but if you buy something, do you find yourself going and watching a bunch of videos or reading the manual for that thing while it's being shipped to you? Because that's totally like confirmation bias. It's like, prove to me, tell me things that can make me go, this is good. I'm glad I bought this thing. But the bandwagon effect is adopting opinions because they're popular. That happens a lot. Humans are herd creatures, right? We definitely are social bunnies, and we like to follow. We like to join, and that's okay, right? You have to be aware of them, okay? There's, a evolutionary advantage to being a joiner, right? Again, sunk cost fallacy is defending their purchases, right, based on investment rather than merit. It's like, I bought it, therefore this thing must be good. And I cranked out, I paid $5,000 for a Mini Moog reissue, therefore it's the greatest synth ever, right? I have to defend my purchase. Be aware of that when that happens. And then novelty bias, right? Are you a heat seeker? Right? We joke, there's a couple guys in the synth club that we refer to as heat seekers. It's like they will buy the new thing, regardless of whether it's dumb or not. They're just like, look at it. It's new. We got to get it. Right? And that can bite you, not just for products that maybe aren't great for you, but it can buy you for like the next version of the thing. Right? What is it? The Korg Op 6 and then the Korg Op 6 Mark II. Right? Well, I got to get the new one. So be aware. Bias leads to, if you're aware of your bias, you will think more clearly and your choices will be more meaningful. All right. So, yeah, I know, Wookie, it's tough when there's no shops there. All right. You got to rely on the community around you. Hopefully there's some community around you. Wookie, you live on another planet though, right? So let me know how the synth shops work there. So section 8 says embrace diversity in musical tools and approaches. This is something we sometimes forget, right? People are tied to brands, they're tied to the things they like, the synths they like. But no single instrument, and it's not just the synth, it's workflows as well. No single instrument and no workflow or any technology is inherently superior for everyone, right? You're like, I like FPGA oscillators. Well, I like analog oscillators. Oh, well, I like software synths, right? They're obviously superior. That is very, it varies by person, right? And nothing is going to be inherently superior for everyone, right? You have to value, the value of a synth is all about your relationship with the synth, right? I've got the Nord Lead A1, okay, which I no longer own. I actually finally sold my last A1. I had a 3 at one point. I sold my last one, my A1R, to a guy on the Discord. And the value of the A1 was in my relationship with it more than the synth itself. It is a very good synth and it's valuable for him, and he's having a good time with it now. And when I owned it, my relationship with it, I knew it like the back of my hand. I could dial whatever I needed to get very quickly right out of it. I could do it blindfolded. So my relationship with that synth was very strong and very valuable. And that's what you want to try and foster with your tools. So if you are like me and you buy a synth, you get it home, you unbox it, you play with it for a bit, and then you don't touch it for a year, that's okay, right? I do that. I say, I got to put my synths in the wine cellar, right? They go sit on the rack and they've got to age like wine for a bit before I can get back to them. That's me forming a relationship with that synth. It's sitting out there. It's part of my collection, right? I play with it for the first week or so. I'm happy with that. Then I put it in my collection. It's ensconced on a pedestal. It's there. And I go through the collection and I look at it and I'm like, oh, look at that. I love my collection, right? And then after a while, I start going, okay, I think I'm ready to start pulling that down, right? It's there. That urge sort of goes there. And that's the relationship with that synth. That's how it forms for me. It may be different for you, right? Let me look here. No shops. You haven't tried doing the wine cellar thing there, Harmonix? It's interesting. It may not work for everyone because my wife is definitely not a fan of that. She's like, good God, look at all these things just sitting here. You don't use them. Anyway, so the value of a synth emerges from the relationship with it, right? And so you celebrate the variety of preferences and habits and creative paths within the community because other people do it other ways, right? When I go to the local synth meetup, right, there are people who do not do what I do. They have a synth, they dig into it, and they live and die by that synth until they basically use it up. And they get to a point where they're like, I know this thing in and out. And they can achieve that really fast, like 8 weeks, like 2 synth meetings. And they come back and I'm like, where's that synth you were rocking that thing last time? Where is it? Oh, he's like, oh, I got rid of it because I'm done with it. He's like, he literally used it up. He was like, I've done everything I want to do. I've expressed everything I want to express with the synth and I've moved on. I got rid of it. I flipped it. I took that money and now I've got this new thing that I'm obsessed with. And that person is blissfully happy going through synths like some people go through, life partners, right? And that's fine. So celebrate that variety and resist the urge to generalize personal success as a universal doctrine. Just because my approach works for me, the old wine rack sort of synth thing, doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Dig into a synth and, burn the candle at both ends until you're done with it. That's that guy's pattern that works for him. That I couldn't do that. I don't have the time for that. He's a student too, so he's, should be studying, but I think he's just playing synths all the time, right? All right, so that's section 8. Almost done here. Let's look at section 9. So cultivate a culture of inquiry, not authority. This is a culture thing, right? This is us, the way we deal with each other, right? When people assert a lot of opinions, and it's very safe to assert opinions in the synth community. People are like, it's just my opinion, don't get bent, right? And that's okay. But when someone asserts an opinion, you should be asking them questions. And when you are about to assert an opinion, you can also ask your own questions, right? You can ask questions before you assert these opinions. You can share your personal experiences without framing them as universal truths, right? A lot of times we'll say, to use the same tired old chestnut, we'll say, analog and hybrid is better than digital, right? So digital oscillators are fine as long as you have analog filters in it, right? And we assert that as a universal truth. And it may be your personal experience is that's true for you, right? But you shouldn't necessarily, ask yourself the question, do I want to frame that as a universal truth? Typically no, but ask the question. Again, this manifesto is not telling you what to do. It's asking questions and suggesting maybe you can consider some of these questions as you're going about with the community. So approach disagreements as opportunities for learning, right? I like, understanding, like, I don't agree with you. This is why. Okay, right? So show me some of that evidence. I'd love to see your evidence. Is there a new paper? Maybe there's a new, maybe there's a new book, or there's a new magazine article that talks about how, what would be an example? I'm kind of wave-tabled out now. What's Casio's CZ synthesis method? I don't know anything about it, but it exists out there. Or what is the new Yuhi Zebralet 3? Right? That thing's got this Bezier curve sort of oscillator thing going on there. How does that work, right? Well, Urs Heckman writes papers about it. Go look at those papers, right? Share those sort of facts about this thing. These are things where you can have disagreements with people and turn it into an opportunity for learning. It's like, well, have you seen how this digital oscillator works? It's really interesting. No, it's not an analog oscillator, but it does really amazing sounds. Let's listen to some demos and understand how it works, right? Phase distortion, thank you. That's the CZ1 stuff. I know nothing of phase distortion. And then encourage curiosity and kindness over competition. I don't see a ton of competition out there, but I just wanted to include it and say it's here. I don't think people are, I don't run in circles where people are having competitions necessarily, because I don't like zero-sum games generally. But if you're, I've got a coworker, Erwin, his artist name is Emerald Arcana. Erwin does a lot of compos. He does composition competitions almost weekly, right? And whenever he relates, tells me the story of this last week's composition or something like that, the compo, he'll be like, it was really interesting. He's like, people were composing things, using methodologies and workflows that he had never thought of or tried, or they were using a compositional technique or a music theory thing that was new to him, right? And so that's curiosity and kindness, and it's less about the competition, even though it is in the form of a competition, right? It's things to consider, right? He who has the most fun wins. That's right, Cyrix. That is the goal of the manifesto, right? And then try and replace dogmatic statements with open-ended exploration, right? Dogmatic stuff is like where you say, this is true because we have assumptions that say it's true. That's dogma, right? Instead of assuming dogma or accepting it, just say, hey, let's go find out. Let's go try it, right? Goodfellow says a competition could be a good way to foster creativity for some people. Absolutely. Like, at least for my friend Emerald Arcana, the competitions are definitely part of his motivating workflow, All right. And then the last section here, section 10, seek joy in the process, right? Remember that synthesizers are ultimately instruments of creativity, right? They're for creating meaning and enjoyment, right? There isn't anything really beyond that you need to remember. Focus on the feelings and the experiences that music making brings into your life. And then let curiosity and play and growth sort of guide your musical journey, right? Anyway, so that is the manifesto for critical thinking in synthesizer culture, right? This is at 1voltperoctave.com. It's there. It's Creative Commons level 0, so there's no copyright. This is absolutely public domain. You can take it and change it. You could profit from this. If you can figure out how to profit from this, you're welcome to do so. But the closing statement is basically the point of the manifesto is to invite synth enthusiasts to think a little critically and act intentionally and embrace the richness of their own creativity, right? The goal of this, the whole point of this document, the point of this stream is not consensus, right? I'm not trying to get you all to agree on something, but I want clarity in that we have many different things we're talking about. And it's not conformity. We're not trying to get everyone to follow a norm or follow a best practice. That's not it either. It's more about understanding that everything is different for everyone, right? And that we're willing to reflect on that stuff, experiment with it, talk to each other about it, and then we can continue to share our personal expression, the music we make, the sounds we generate, and thoughtful inquiry, like questions. Let me ask you questions. How did you write that? How did you make that sound, right? And then just share that simple joy of making music, all right? So I know this is probably a blinding flash of the obvious. People are like, well, duh, you haven't said anything novel. And that was not my goal. I wasn't trying to say, here's a thing you've never thought of. This is me just writing down for myself what I want to do as I move forward. And I wrote it down. It's here. It's published. If a piece of this is useful for you, take it and do what you will with it. All right. So that is that. So my Logify says, Synth Seeker, how do you like acoustic pianos? I love acoustic pianos. I don't have the space in my house for one, and I used to sell them for a living. And so I am capable of playing them poorly, but I don't have space for one, and I have space for a digital piano, but my wife will not let me put a digital piano in the house. She's like, nope, it's got to be a real one. And it's like, well, we got to come up with a space for it, and we do not agree on where that's going to be. So that is the life. Anyway, so with that, let us, where am I going? I think I'm going to flip back to the camera and we'll make a little noise and then we'll call it a day. So let's do this. All right. We got a drone going here. Let us kill this drone. All right, so let's talk about synths a little bit here. What's in this rack? So we're using the push. This is the Bobby and the Corgis rig, which you can't really see. Okay. And basically over here, this way, there's a bunch of Korg synths. There's one up here above me. And then there's a little Moog synth down here on the side. So we've got a Subsequent 37. I'm using Ableton Live in the push here. So all the effects are mostly from Ableton, although the Korg synths have nice effects. I've got a little Launchpad Mini over here. That is what I refer to as my jelly beans. I use this for transposition, but I've also got it rigged up now so that I've got banks of presets set up. I can change the current preset by tapping things here. So I can run through. So I can run through 5 presets on each of the synths. So that was the Subsequent. All right. Let's see here. Has anyone else popped in? If I've missed you because I was busy espousing, I'm sorry. Let's see. The Wookiee says radical idea from Zyrex. He who has the most fun wins. Yep. Super radical. I'm glad you liked it. The manifesto is like a brain massage. Thanks, Fog Bungler, for letting me touch your brain then. All right. Let's see what else. Then we've got an Op 6 sitting over here. Right. I'm not going to go through all of the 5 presets I've got here, but the Op 6 is a nice little synth. I like organs, right? And the FM synths do organs really well. I like these tone wheel organs because they sound very prog rock to me, and I've got a thing about prog. You play a tone wheel organ, it's like, oh my God, it sounds like yes, right? And then that's the op6. We've also got a mod wave here. So we have all the Korg Pi synths except for the King Korg Neo. I don't remember. There's another one. Basically, op6, mod wave, wave state, multi-poly. And this is the mod wave. And the mod wave is doing pad duty today because I'm kind of doing this sort of like droney, ambient Berlin school prog sort of thing. So I'm inventing a new genre, or I've decided to name it. I've got an album coming out before Christmas, and it's my music, Luke music, which is sort of where Berlin school and prog and film music meet. I've decided to call it Cozy Prog because it's like concept album, story music. So with, lyrics or stanzas that tell a story. But it's a very low stakes story, and it's very cozy and pleasant to listen to. It's not like a lot of prog these days is definitely migrated into the metal space, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a huge fan. But I don't do that, right? I'm not going to be like doing guitar prog shredding. I'm do synth oriented cozy prog, within that with my Rickenbacker bass kind of sound. Anyway, so the mod wave is mostly doing pads here. Yeah, I like prog metal. I agree, Go Felon. Let's see. Reg asks, can you do transposition with the Mini? Yep, absolutely. You thought you needed a specific note mode. It doesn't have to achieve this. No, you can totally do it. Well, so I'm using Ableton Live, and Live is root and mode aware, and so I can use the Mini to do transposition. So it's something we could talk about in the Discord if you want. It's trivially easy to do. Some samples of mod wave pads. Space noises. And then, of course, this is Cassini. It's the most space music patch preset that comes on the mod wave, and I love it. All right, so that's our mod wave. Then the wave state, which is a weird synth, but I like it. Right, sample sequencing. And I particularly like it for, where is it? This one. There's a glockenspiel with the high strings behind it. It's like the Steven Spielberg E.T. kind of like a mystical. We'll put a drone under that in a minute and sort of play with those bells. And then the multi-poly is doing kind of bass duty today. Actually, no, the multi-poly is doing 80s sort of synthwave stuff. Very horny. Very horns oriented. Yeah, so here's the thing. If you get a multi-poly, here's a tip. If you play with any of the Korg Pi synths, multi-poly is probably the best example of this. There are 4 mod knobs on the front of it, right, that are basically like macros. Make sure when you're preset surfing, you turn those macros because they completely take a sound that is maybe kind of mid and turn it into something. Because I ran across this. Let's see. Let's sustain this. All right. And then I'm like, okay, let's add a sub. All right. And and then it's like one of the other knobs is like starts messing with the gate. It's this pulsing going on. Then we start bringing in a little resonance. And then we start bringing in the distortion. And I'll say this, Korg knows, I mean, it's digital, it's fully digital synth, but their distortion is a good, very responsive distortion. All right, so we take that, and then we go and we put a bass under it. Let's do something a little sharper than that. There we go. And then we go play the leads on it. Ah, see, something's out of tune there. So this is a very interesting digital problem I've been having lately. With the new synths, everybody's so obsessed with analog feel that they've been adding these drift circuits to everything, and sometimes it's like too much. So like the bass and that sort of comping synth coming off of the multi-poly are actually detuned slightly because of drift, and so is this is an Omnisphere lead. It's got some drift in there too, and now these sound out of tune to me. There we go. All right, so let's do this. If we want to do some transposition, I need to reset this. We're riding on sustains on drones at this point. Let me do this. All right. Let me actually build a little thing and we'll do some transposition here. All right, we'll do that. We will cut this down to 2 bars. I don't like that. Hold on a second. I gotta tweak one of these notes. There we go. All right. All right, now let's do a little, we'll mix, we're doing a little kind of synth wavy tone, but we'll do some Berlin patterns here. Let's do. I'm doing live looping, sort of building these 8-bar patterns. We'll get something kind of thick going, and then we will do some transposition. Bring that up an octave. Let's bring this down. So I'm transposing over here on the jelly beans. Switch to a different lead here. There we go. This needs a beat, but I didn't set up for any rhythm today. Sorry, guys. And there we go. So I was into it. I wasn't watching the comments, but let's see. Doug says, I know you've used Trillion for bass. Is it worth it? You updated Omnisphere 3. It's expensive. So like getting Trillion just for one particular bass sound is probably not worth it. But because there's some really great sample libraries out there, and Trillion is a sampled bass. So there's a company named, the Pear. They're in the name of the company is Pear, like the fruit. They have some multi-sampled bass libraries that are really good, but also pretty inexpensive. Look at those first if you're looking, if money's tight. But I like Trillion. But it is, I think it's another like $400 or something. I don't know how much it costs. I bought Trillion like more than 6 years ago when it first came out. So I don't know what it goes for now. But Omnisphere is 500, so Trillion's probably up there. Is the volume okay? Good. I wasn't sure. I hadn't set up this streaming rig in a while. So David Knight says, I love my Push 3 so much. It really changed my relationship with working the box. Right. It's gear, man. And it's about our relationship with the gear, just like we say in the manifesto, right? I love the Push 3 as well. I like grids. And the Push 3 is nice. I don't like the Push 3 as a standalone controller, though. It is capable, but I think it still needs to be cooked. My main problem with the Push 3 is the Intel processor in it. It gets so hot. I really wish that they would do an ARM version, which may not be feasible at all. I know nothing about electronics engineering, right? I'm a software guy. So I don't know, it may be, but Ableton thinks ahead, right? The Push 2, they supported that. They still support it. And it was like 12 years of hardware before, the Push 3 came out. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. I hope that they come out with a RISC, an ARM-based brain for the Push. Oh yeah, Andre Soren's Push Bible is a really great resource. So I'm glad you got it, Reg. It's expensive as well, but he tries really hard to teach people well. I like Andre Soren. I think I bought an early version of the Push Bible, and that helped, but I haven't kept up to date on it. Doug says, does Trillion have bass patterns or is it just sounds? It has a bunch of ARPs. So if you like ARP, arpeggiated bass patterns and stuff, it's got a ton of them in there. And plus it effectively uses the Omnisphere sequencer and arpeggiator. So if you like the ARP in Omnisphere, if you learn to use the arpeggiator and the sequencer in Omnisphere, you'll be able to just immediately use and sequence and arpeggiate whatever you want using Trillion. Because it's the same. You open Trillion patches in Omnisphere if you have them both installed. It basically says, I think the framework of Trillion is a lightweight version of Omnisphere. And that's tailored for Trillion and its base stuff. Because I never open Trillion, the app. I just open Omnisphere and go to the Trillion library and say, load the Trillion bass sound I want. Let's see. Reg says, too many different button push options for an old guy like me to handle. Muscle memory comes with time. Learn it in sections, maybe. I don't know. Or get something simpler. I like the Move for composing. Or what's the new hotness that everyone is loving? MP3 Live, MPC Live 3 is really, really popular right now. And that has a completely different workflow than the Push. And so, check that out. If the Push is too complex, I think the MPC is also complex, but it's a different kind of complexity. So maybe that'll work for you, David says, I fully expect an ARM upgrade in the next year. I hope so. I really do. I really hope so. All right. So that's it. I've been running for an hour and 20 minutes. I think I'm done. I wanted to cover the manifesto. What I'll probably end up doing is snipping out the manifesto walkthrough stuff and turning that into a video. So if you see another video pop up on the channel, that's just an edit down of what's happening in this stream. And thank you, everyone. I'm really pleased that you attended. Hope you liked it. Hope it was useful. We'll see what sort of comments we get. And I think that's about it. I am going to call it a day. And I hope the rest of you have a great week. For me, Christmas is coming fast, man. Thanksgiving was so late this year that I've got two more weeks of like work, and then I'm on vacation for Christmas, New Year's. My wedding anniversary is between Christmas and New Year's here, so it's like all the mega holidays are coming up for me in a couple of weeks. And this coming week of work is going to be very mega stressful because we've compressed everything down into a 2-week period for the rest of the year. So anyway, I may publish some videos or I may not, but we'll see what happens. But I do have a new album coming out, which I will tell you guys about later when it's ready. It's being mastered right now. So thanks for your time. I am going to wander over to the streaming machine here, get ready to kill the stream. You all have a great week. Thanks for spending time with me here at Synth Seeker.